that are from both IG and GC. We're going to be touching upon both papers. I know that I can't solve everything right now, so I will try to solve as much as I can. All right, so this is a 0500 paper. Is it visible? Yeah. Perfect. So this is a 0500 paper. We're starting with this, and then I will move back and forth between 0500 and 1123. So if you're preparing for IG, you can obviously take a pen and paper and note down all the things that I will tell you. If you are appearing for GC, then when it comes to that, you write down everything. Now it says 0500/12. Why does it say 12? Because again, this is the variant that we appear for. The paper that I will be discussing has been taken from May, June 2025. And the timing is 2 hours. Now, unless you strategically plan this time, you are going to be left with rushing between 2 or 3 questions. So effective time management is very important. I have already recorded a video on effective time management, which I will be uploading right after the class ends. So you can go to YouTube and take a look at that as well, because like I said, strategic time planning is very, very important for ensuring a good grade in the English language paper. So it's 2 hours, 80 marks, and we are going to be discussing how we can do most of these questions, because like I said, I can do all of them. I will not be touching upon 2D right now, just so I'm clear. The writer's effect questions, as you guys call them, or the writer's craft questions, or the use of language questions. And the reason is that it demands an entire class of its own, an entire video on its own. So we are going to be doing that tomorrow, inshallah. I'm going to be uploading a video on that. Now, let's take a look at this. So just so we are clear, let me just quickly do this for you guys. We have 3 texts in paper 1, text A, text B, and text C. Text A gives you 1A to 1E questions. Text B gives you 1F. And text C gives you multiple questions, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, and question 3. So there are many questions that you end up from text C. If I divide the marks as well, then these are for 15 marks. The summary is for 15 marks. 2A is for 4 marks, 2B is for 3, 2C is for 3, 2D is for 15, and 3 is for 25 marks. So collectively, this makes about 50 marks. So 50 and 30, that collectively makes 80 marks. Why am I telling you all this? I'm doing all this to let you know just how important text C is. Text C is giving you more than 50% of your grade in paper 1. And this is very important to understand, because this is going to be slightly problematic if you mess this up, but it's going to be really, really amazing if you end up doing good in this. So let's get one thing out of the way as we are discussing this. Can I do this first? Of course. Can I do this first? Sure. Can I do this first? Absolutely, yes. So whether you pick the text C or text B or text A, it does not matter. You can do any text that you want first. Just understand that whichever text you choose, all of the questions from that text have to be done first before you move over to any other text. What do I mean by that? I have a few kids who are under the habit of doing 2D first, because it's a very important question, an extended response to reading first, and then they ignore all these questions and then they move to summary writing. Big mistake. You need to understand that you can't keep switching between texts, and the reason is that under pressure in an exam, you are likely to mess things up if you do that. So if you are choosing to start with 2D, you can absolutely do that. Start with 2D, get done with question 3, then come back to either 2A, 2B, or 2C. And once you're done with all of them, then move to either text A or text B. So I hope that I've answered one problem that kids mostly face, which is, can I switch between texts? Absolutely, yes. Do I recommend it? After you're done with one text? Yes, not before. So let's move forward. Now that we have a few things out of the way, we're going to start with solving a few questions. We're starting with the 1A to 1E questions, which is, if you guys feel like I'm going a bit fast, it's because I want to get done with maximum information, maximum stuff in as limited time as we have. But chalo, let's see how things go. So question 1A to 1E. Question 1 is usually a what question. Now, a what question is actually an explicit question. Please give me a minute. All right. So this is an explicit question. An explicit question means it is a direct question. Direct means that the answer to this question is going to be very, very superficially present in your text or on your text. So, what were the first food trucks called? They were called something. You can take a look at the text and just write down that one word response, and you will get that 1 mark. It's a 1 mark question. You write down that one word. A lot of kids are under the impression that unless and until I write down an exact sentence, like a proper sentence, I will not get a mark. That is where you guys are wrong. Please remember that question 1A to 1E are something that we called point marking. So, point marking means that the number of marks indicate the number of points that you have to write down. If it's a 1 mark question, you're going to write down 1 point. If it's a 2 mark question, you write down 2 points. If it's a 2 mark question, you write down 2 points. If it's a 3 mark question, then we need 3 pointers. So we need to see what the mark allocation for the question is in order to ensure that I am getting done with everything. All right, so let's go back to this. So, what were the first food trucks called? What is a very explicit question. You already know that. Let's move forward to the next question. This one is very interesting, frankly, one of my favorites. Why? Because it gives me an insight into the child's mindset. What do we need in this question? It says using your own words. And just by the way, guys, if I let you in on a little secret, the examiners actually recommend that unless the question specifies that you use your own words, it is recommended to use the words of the text. I'm going to repeat myself one more time so you understand that unless the question is specifying to use your own words, the examiners recommend that you use the words of the text, which means in this question, in this question, in this question, and no, wait, not that one. So in the questions that I've ticked out, 1A, 1C, 1D part 1, and 1D part 2, I'm going to use the words of the text. Why? Because the question does not ask me to use my own words. Wherever the question specifically says that I have to use my own words, which are, by the way, only 2 questions here, 1B and 1E, as you can see here, these are the only 2 questions where I am required to use my own words. Everything else, I can just do a few remodeling of the text, just play along with the text, change the wording a bit, try and make sense out of it. You know how we say English has to English, it has to make sense. So, other than that, every other question is going to require you to use the words of the text. Now, let's take a look at 1B, which I was getting at. Using your own words, explain what the text means by. Now, a lot of kids don't really understand these keywords. The keywords are what, explain, give, identify, explain, and then again, explain. So wherever the word explain comes, because it has come 2 or 3 times here, please remember that you are supposed to give a thorough detail of what you are trying to say. However, the limitation here is this word. The limitation here is the word text, which means that you are bound to give contextual meaning. Contextual meaning means that in whatever sense, because in English, one word can have multiple different meanings based on its connotations and nuances and all of those things. Synonyms can vary between each other depending on the situation. We can have so many different variations of a single word in English. Eventually, it all comes down to the context. And what is the context here? This. They're telling you what the text means. So, based on the context of the word, you have to give the meaning. Now, let's take a quick look at this here. The word is sample delicacies. I'm just going to solve one for you just to give you an idea because I can't solve everything. Now, sample means options. It means varieties. It means choices. And then you have the word delicacies. Delicacies now in the text, again, if I keep on switching back and forth between the text, it's going to take us forever. But just to give you a basic idea, delicacy has to do with food items, because quite literally the text is called food trucks. Now, delicacies aren't just food. If you write on food, you will not get a mark, even though delicacies in a way mean food. But they're not just any kind of food. They are luxury foods. or you can say unique foods. So will I get a mark if I write down varieties of, let me write it down here so there's no confusion. If I write down varieties of foods, will I get these 2 marks? No. I am going to get 1 out of 2. Why am I getting 1 mark? 1 mark I'm getting for using the word variety for the word sample. But I'm getting a 0 out of 1 for the word food. Why? Because like I said, delicacy is not food. Delicacy is a luxury food item. So what is going to get me 2 out of 2? Varieties of unique food items. Now I'm going to get 2 out of 2. Why will I do that? Why will I get that mark? Because varieties, 1 out of 1, and unique food items, 1 out of 1. So what am I trying to get at? Specificity. You have to ensure that you are giving specific answers, targeted answers, answers that very clearly tell you what the answer is about. So, no ambiguity, no random answers, no generalizations, no random yapping. Please remember, it's English. You will get a mark if you are worthy of it. Otherwise, you won't. All right, let's move forward. So 1C says give 2 differences. Now, give is a very easy indicator. Give means you just have to write down. Now, because the question does not use the word explain, we are allowed to use phrases. So if you want to write on a phrase from the text, quite literally copy paste this in quotation marks. We are okay with that as well. If you want to remodel the text, remodeling actually means to change the wording or to alter. I wouldn't say change, I would say slight alteration in the wording of the text, then that works as well. But you can write it down in the form of phrases, you can write it down in the form of bullets. You don't have to give proper sentences. We're okay with that. Now, let me get another answer or question out of the way. Will I get a mark if I write down 2 answers in 1 bullet? Absolutely, yes. So if I write down 2 answers, here, 1 answer, and then 1 answer, and then I write a third answer here. And suppose this one is wrong and these 2 are correct. Will I get 2 out of 2? Absolutely, yes. So, are you allowed to write more than what's required? Of course, the examiner isn't going to allow you to do that. They're never going to go ahead and actually say that, oh, the candidate should write more than what's required. They always say candidates should write as much as the question demands. But if you have space and you feel like you want to write down 3 things, by all means, you can write it down. The 2 correct ones will be credited. You will get the mark for 2 correct answers. Let's move forward to the next one, identification. The word identification actually means extracting something out from a text. So identifying means you take a look at text A and then you identify something from paragraph 3. By the way, you may have noticed how every question generally tells you, I'm saying generally because it specifies either the line number or it specifies the paragraph number, but they do specify where the question has been taken from. For example, they might say reread paragraph 2, or they might ask you to say reread paragraph 3, or they might ask you to reread paragraph 4. Now, there's a reason why they're doing it, because I always tell my students that nothing in English is without a sense behind it. If they are saying reread paragraph 3, it means it is absolutely ridiculous to be reading any other paragraph, and it's a waste of time as well. If the question says read paragraph 3, it means the answer is absolutely 100% in paragraph 3. Should I even be wasting my time looking at paragraph 2 or paragraph 4? Absolutely not. You are not going to look at paragraph 4 or paragraph 5 or 1 or 2 if the question has specified the number 3. Again, it goes for the same thing here. If it specifies paragraph 2, you're not going to waste time looking at any other paragraph. So ensure that you are looking at the exact place where the question has been taken from, because 110% the answer is from there. Now, again, identification, we have that keyword there, but we don't have the keyword explain. So it means 2 reasons. 2 reasons means any 2 reasons. Again, from paragraph 3, you can use phrases, you can use bullets. You can use one words, two words if they, of course, are the exact answers, and you will get the mark. But D2 is slightly problematic. Why? Because this now starts to use the word explain. They're saying explain, and there's another problem here. There are two keywords, by the way, in D2. They're saying explain and they're saying why. So please remember that the moment you have the word identify, the question is explicit. But the moment we introduce the word why in a question, it becomes implicit. For those of you who are not aware, I for implicit, I for indirect. Indirect question, which means that if the question says, why many business people prefer operating mobile food trucks to running restaurants in permanent locations, it means that the question is not really that direct. And the answer to this question is also not that direct. So, not only do you have to spend some time in understanding this question, you also have to spend some time in figuring out the answer as well, because the answer will not be superficially present, which means that you will have to do some what was the word that I was saying a while ago? Remodeling. You will have to remodel the text. You will have to alter the wording of the text, or you might have to extract out implicit ideas of the text. You might have to figure out and guess, much like a detective, by the way. You know how Sherlock Holmes ends up solving his cases? There are certain clues that are given to him, and he puts two and two together, and he's like, oh, voila, it's a four. So what you are doing is that you are putting together these clues, and then you are trying to get to the answer. So D2, why is one of the reasons that most of the kids in D2 end up losing their marks? Because their answers are correct, but they are explicit. They're not implicit, and that is a problem. So you have to understand that it has to do with the word why. Wherever the word why is present, please understand that we are looking at implicit attitudes. And again, I told you a very easy way to remember implicit, I for indirect. Let's take a look at 1E now. So 1E again also gives you the same problem. Now there are three problems here. We have the problem explained from D2, and we have the problem y from D2 as well. But now we are introduced to another problem, which is use your own words. Now, one of the reasons why maximum number of kids end up losing marks in this question is that their answer is absolutely correct. All of the 3 points, because by the way, you are supposed to give 3 points for getting these 3 marks, they are writing 3 points, and those 3 points are correct as well. But then what is the problem that they end up getting a 0 out of 3? Because these points that they have given are not in their own words. Will the examiner give you a mark if you write down the correct answer from the text, but it's not in your own words? No. Why? Because instructions are not being followed. Instructional feedback, instructional assessment is something that goes on in Cambridge all the time for all subjects, I'm sure. And so if the question is using bold words to let you know that you have to use your own words, should you even be expecting to get a mark if you write down your own words? No. So, how do you solve a question like this? By the way, there's a very easy way to solve this question. Ignore, let me try and do something here. Ignore that this exists for a while if you want to find out the answer. For a while, ignore this exists. Now the question looks something like this. Explain why it might be challenging to establish a unique food truck business nowadays. This is a very straightforward question. What am I going to do? I'm going to look at the text and I'm going to make my notes here. Why is it challenging? Maybe I'm just going to give you a random answer here. Maybe there's a competition. Maybe the market is saturated. By the way, it's the same thing, but I'm just letting you know here. Maybe it's saturated. Maybe the customers are not open to new flavors. Just giving you a random idea. So maybe these are the 3 answers that I have found from the text. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this. Now I'm going to think, oh, but I'm supposed to be writing down the answer in my own words. So now what I'm going to do is, now that I have the answer with me, I'm going to convert these 3 points in my own words and I'm going to write them down here. And this is going to ensure that not only do you end up writing all 3 points, that they are also in your own words as well. So these are tiny strats, as I don't know, this is the term I believe Gen Z is using these days. These are a few strats that kids are using these days to ensure that not only do they answer the explaining part, not only do they end up answering the why part, they're also using their own words. And if you have listened to the video that I've uploaded regarding summary writing, I've also touched upon when we talk about using our own words. What do we mean by that? What are we looking at and all of it? There are certain limitations to that as well. There are certain words that we change, words that we don't change. We don't change proper nouns. We don't change names. We don't change any difficult word because, again, that would be putting us in trouble. So we end up ensuring that as much as we can, we use our own words because, again, we just have to show the examiner that we put in some effort, you know. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. Now, this was all 1A to 1E for IGCSE. I'm now going to switch the paper before moving forward to GCE because I have to explain a few things regarding that as well. Let's give the GCE people a chance here. 1123 paper. All right. So now this is 1123. Same things here. Take a look. 1123/12. This has also been taken from May June 2025. 1123, by the way, is the code for GCE, or as other people like to call it, O level, I guess. It's for 2 hours, but now the interesting part is that you have 2 hours against 50 marks. And in IGCSE, it was 2 hours against 80 marks. So there's a very, very tiny sort of a flexibility here with the time management, which means that you have an ample opportunity to spend more time on the questions, but the question difficulty changes as well. Let's take a look now. So it says, read text A, the elephant and the boy. Oh, by the way, if we talk about the text like I did with IGCSE a while ago, the biggest distinction or demarcation or difference that we have in GCE is that it only has text A and text B. There's no text C here. So question 1 and question 2 have been taken from text A, and question 3A and 3B, by the way, 3A in here is the summary question. So the summary question and the short response question, which is worth 5 marks and 20 marks, and text A is worth 25 marks here as well. So 25 and 20 and 5 collectively make 50 marks. Now, this is how the mark division of GCE paper works. So in this case, text A and text B are going to be getting equal division, equal amount of importance. Let's move forward. It says in paragraph 1, what was the first physical feature people noticed when they met Jahan? I don't know if you guys have solved this question. I'm hoping and assuming, and in a way expecting as well, that by now you should have practiced this paper because this is a very interesting paper. One of the key problems that I've seen kids in this question is that they ignore this keyword first. And they're like, oh, in paragraph 1, what was the physical feature people noticed? And then they start writing about how he was restless, which, by the way, is not a physical feature. Physical feature are usually related to the way that a person looks. So maybe he was chubby or fat or slim or dark or light, or the way that he looked, his hair and all of that. But the mark is for this word. The first thing that anyone notices about Jahan. So please remember to figure out the keywords of the questions. In this case, it's what, by the way, if you remember from what I just discussed regarding IGCSE, what is an explicit question? Explicit means direct questions. It's a 1-mark question, so we only need one important piece of information. In this case, the first physical feature, and we will get the mark. Ma'am, am I allowed to write down 1-word responses? Absolutely, yes. You can write down 1-word responses, provided that, of course, that answer is correct, and you will get the mark. Now, this question is one of those questions which ends up confusing a few kids. So I hope to clarify some of that confusion here. It says in paragraph 2, how did Jahan feel about Istanbul when he first saw it? Give 2 details from the text to support your answer, and the question is of 3 marks. So, what are you supposed to do in a question like that? Number one, you have the keyword how. Hows and whys are implicit, by the way. So, again, some kind of indirect. You remember the 2 words that we did a while ago? Remodeling and alterations. So, some kind of remodeling or alterations of the text will have to be done only in paragraph 2, by the way. And then we're going to figure out his feelings. I'll just give you a quick tip here. Feelings are all about adjectives because you are describing how someone's feeling, and you're trying to sort of give us more information about something. And whenever you modify a noun of a sort, that is essentially an adjective. So try and answer in adjectives. Now, the question says, how did Jahan feel about Istanbul when he first saw it? Now, the problem that we end up having in this question is, let me tell you what the actual requirement is first, and then I'll tell you what the problem is. The requirement of this question is 1 feeling and 2 details. Can you please write that down somewhere so you remember? The question, the answer to 1B is you write down 1 feeling and 2, we call them supporting details. Which means that if he was feeling, for instance, angry, then I have to give 2 details to show where he was feeling angry, which means that I have to quote something from the text. So quote 1 and quote 2. And if you take a look at the examiner report or mark scheme, wherever you're, taking your guide from, examiners actually recommend that you use or you quote the words exactly that they have been used in the answer because it makes things easy for you guys. Can you write them down without quoting them exactly in the text? Absolutely, yes. Anything works. Please remember that it's English. As long as it's making sense, there's a very funny, interesting phrase that I tell my kids, which is make it make sense. So as long as you're making sense out of it, it will give you the mark. But at the moment it stops making sense, you will lose the mark. So 1 feeling and 2 details is what we are looking at. 1 feeling, 2 supporting details of that feeling. If it's irrelevant, if the supporting detail is irrelevant to the feeling that you are giving, you will lose the mark. So, a lot of kids are under the impression that they have to write down 1 feeling and 1 detail, and 1 feeling and 1 more detail. So, this is I don't know where they learned this from. Some kids do that. They end up writing like this. They're like, oh, 1 feeling, 1 detail. The problem with this is that it doesn't answer the question. Why does it not answer the question? Because the question says 2 details. See, take a look at this S here. S here signifies plural. I'm going to erase all this so we have some clarity on what's going on here. All right. The question says, how did Jahan feel? Number 1. So we need 1 feeling. And then the question says, give 2 details. S, like I said, S signifies plurals. 2 details of the 1 feeling that you have. It's quite literally in the question what you have to write down. So if you write the answer down in any other way other than the way that the question is asking you, then again, that might be a problem because you're not adhering to the rubric. And if you're not adhering to the rubric, then no marks for you, sadly. So 3 marks, 1 mark is for 1 feeling, 2 marks are for the 2 details. So it's actually marked like this. 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. And this is how you get marked for this question. Enough time with this question. Let's move forward. Explain why Jahan hurried back below deck. Just to give you a basic idea of this is from line 15. Rush to line 15 whenever they tell you that a specific quotation or a quoted part has been taken from a specific line. Rush to that line and figure out the context. And the context is going to help you understand the reason, because why is all about reasoning and logic. So reasoning and logic. So rush to line 15, figure out where this quoted part is, find out the context of this, try and figure out the reason why Jahan was hurrying back below deck, and then write it down in a proper structured sentence. Because it's English and we have the word explain here, and you can only explain things in sentences. So, will I lose a mark if I write down a phrase? There are chances that you might, but because the reason is that the explanation might not be enough, and the question quite literally says you have to explain, which means that sufficient explanation has to be given to ensure that the answer is in line with the mark scheme. Let's move forward. From paragraph 5, identify. Now, again, we're up to the easier bit. Identify two details, two phrases. Can I write down phrases? Yes. Can I write down bullets? Yes. What happens if I end up writing two answers in the same bullet? Will I get 2 marks? Also, yes. So you will get 2 marks depending on where you write them down. What happens if I write down below the space that has been provided? Number one, examiners generally recommend that you end up writing only as much as is required and in the space that you have been given. There are a lot of kids that, by the way, are under the habit. I have kids like these as well that start writing up here and start writing up, here on this side, extra part and all of that. I'm going to ask you, and by the way, here as well, I'm going to advise you against it because examiners themselves tell you, as in the candidates, that if there's any additional information, it should be written down on the additional pages. So try to avoid writing on the left, right, or the space at the bottom or at the top. First off, try to ensure that you're writing your answers in the space that has been given. And if at all you can't write down in the space that has been given, or you have big handwriting, or something of that sort, because I have a kid that has an humongous has handwriting. What I always advise him to do is to write down anything extra on the additional pages. From paragraph 5, give 2 reasons. Give, by the way, is also an explicit marker. So give also means you have to provide explicit reasons why Jahan thought the elephant's life would be better at the place. Again, some kind of reasoning. The reasoning can be implicit, can be explicit. Why am I saying this? Because this word is being used alongside the word give. If the word why was there on its own, that definitely would have been implicit. But now because we have the word why alongside the word give, it means that the reasons can be indirect or the reasons can be direct. You just have to write them down. Let's take a look at 1F. In paragraph 6, the sailors found it difficult to get the elephant out of the ship. What was the first problem the sailors had? What is again explicit, so a very direct answer. How did the sailors solve this problem? Now, because how is not with the word give or anything, it means that this requires indirect answering. So the problem itself is going to be very explicit. But the solution to that problem is going to be slightly indirect, and you may have to work around the text for that. How do we know this? Because of the keyword how. Remember that more than half of your grade depends on your thorough and clear understanding of the keywords of the question. Now, again, using your own words alongside the word explain. So, explain suggests sentences. What suggests explicit answer or direct answer? And using your own words suggests that I have to use my own words. So, I'm going to find out a direct answer. What the text means by this means that there is a contextual meaning, context based meaning. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to find out a context based meaning, and I'm going to write down that meaning in the form of sentences, and that too in my own words, and then I will get those 2 marks. How will I get those 2 marks, by the way? There are 2 words here, ultimately, and we have the word managing here. So because there are 2 words, I'm going to end up getting 2 marks for 1 mark for this, 1 mark for this. So 1 here, 1 here, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. I'm going to get 2 marks for essentially giving the answer of ultimately and the word managing. Let's move forward. Explain using your own words. Again, the same keywords are repeating again and again. Explain sentences using your own words, my own words. Now, this is a very interesting question. And again, a few questions where the kids end up messing up. So we are going to ensure that we have some clarity on this question as well. Explain using your own words Jahan's different feelings about the elephant. What is the key word in this question? The key words are different feelings. Different. Different means multiple things here. I will get to that in a bit. Give 3 details from anywhere in the text. But there are 3 things to understand here. So I'm going to try and ensure pens in your hands. Please write down these things if you're preparing for GCE. 1H is one of the most common questions where kids end up losing maximum marks. Why? Because you end up writing insufficient, because you are unaware of what you are supposed to write down. We are going to take care of that insufficiency right now. So the question says 3 details, but the question asked me about different feelings. So what am I supposed to do? And the question is of 3 marks. So let's go through this one by one. The question is of 3 marks. I need different feelings, which means I need one feeling, and one feeling. So I need 3 feelings. Why? Because number 1, different. So I need to show variety. And number 2, the question is of 3 marks. So these 3, the reason that I've chosen 3 is because of the mark allocation. I hope that we are clear till here. We are figuring out 3 feelings. Why? Because of the keyword different and because of the mark allocation, which is 3. By the way, the word different that I was getting at a while ago, if I write down that Jahan was joyous and Jahan was ecstatic, then these are going to be taken forward as one feeling. Why? Because I hope you know this by now, that ecstatic means very joyous and joyous means very happy. So happy is joyous and ecstatic is very happy. So more or less it's the same thing. And the question is saying that I need different feelings. So where is the difference? If it's joyous and ecstatic, then it's the exact same thing. So I'm not really writing down the answer to the question, right? I'm just yapping at this point. So I won't get a mark. So I have to say something like, again, just assuming here, one feeling is joyous, one is confused, and one is angry. So 3 different feelings: joy, happiness, confusion, befuddlement, anger. You know what anger is? 3 different feelings, 3 marks. However, please stop. We are not going to get the mark just yet. Why? Because the question says 3 details and I have only identified the feelings. So am I getting the mark? Not yet. When am I going to get the mark? I am going to get the mark when I successfully identify 3 different feelings and provide one supporting detail for each feeling. One supporting detail, one supporting detail. And because I hope that you are aware by now that we have no concept of point marking. By point marking, I mean half marking in Cambridge. So when will I get the mark? I will get the mark if I successfully write down this. I write down this, I will get 1 mark. I write this down, I will get 1 more mark. I write this down, I will get 1 more mark, and 1, 1, and 1, I will get a 3 out of 3. But if I only write down supporting details, I can't really write down supporting details, by the way, if I don't have anything to support it with, because it is called a supporting detail. So I'm going to first identify the different feelings that we have regarding the elephant, that, Jahan's different feelings about the elephant. Once we have identified those 3 different feelings, we're going to look, by the way, it says from anywhere in the text, because the question does not specify which paragraph to look at. The answers can be in the very beginning, the answers can be in the end. Usually they're scattered all over the place in the text. So you will have to do some thorough reading of the text to understand what the feelings are, the different feelings, and that for each feeling, which you will infer, by the way, the word that I'm using is infer. Infer means deduce. Deduce means you'll have to be Sherlock Holmes for a while and you'll have to pick out the clues and then you'll have to understand what's going on and then you'll have to use your own words. So it's not like an easy mark here, which is why most of the kids end up losing marks in this question. So once you have identified three different feelings, you're going to provide one supporting detail for each of those different feelings. And so one feeling with one detail, one mark, and one more feeling with one more detail, another mark. And then lastly, one last feeling with one last detail, and you will get 3 marks. And yes, you have to write this down. And yes, you can easily get done with this in the time that you have in the space that has been given. So I hope that this answer is very clear to you because, like I said in the very beginning, you end up losing marks not because there's something wrong with what you're writing, but because you are writing insufficient. Insufficiency is the problem here. Insufficiency means that you're not writing as much as you are required to. So that is a problem. Right. So this answers all the short questions that we have. Of course, we have this writer's craft questions, but I'm going to have to switch back to the 0500 paper and then we'll see how things are. All right. So we're back to the 0500 paper and the next question is, by the way, summary writing, which I will not be discussing because I've already made a video on this. What I will discuss, however, are one or two, quick pointers. And for this, both IG and GC kids can, take out their pens and start writing down because the style of writing and the language, the kind of language itself, these are all similarities in both IG and GC summary. So we're just going to quickly discuss this and then we'll see if we have time to move over or to move back and forth between the papers. Let's see how things go. So number one, what do we mean by style? You know how when someone dresses up a certain way and you're like, oh, this person has a very great sense of style. It's how they carry themselves. It's how they show themselves. It's how something looks like on paper, or it's how something looks like when you view it. So essentially, style means a visual of something. As in, what am I looking at? When I'm looking at a writing text type, for example, if I'm looking at a summary, by the way, I am discussing summary here. I've made a very long video on this, but chalo, let's still discuss a few things. We are looking at a plain, informative text. Can you please write down these 3 words for me? Plain and informative. What do I mean by plain and informative? Informative is the tone here, and plain is the writing style. So what do I mean by all this? I mean, I'm looking at simple words, which means that any fancy schmancy words I may have gathered up in the last 1 year, I'm not going to show them off in my summary writing. Where can I get to show them off? I can show them off in paper 2. Paper 2 is the place for showing off your language prowess or how you're great at language or how amazing and wide vocabulary you have. But paper 1 is not the place for it. Paper 1 requires you to write down simple words, plain text, and yet informative at the same time. Informative how? Informative is, of course, it is dependent on the keywords of the question. In this case, how and why are old buses being used? I've already discussed this question in the video that I've answered, so I'm not going to delve much in this. So what do we have so far? We are looking at plain, informative text. Simple words here, right? So keep that in mind, please. Then when we take a look at language, for instance, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. Formal language. Most of you aren't even aware of where you are losing marks. And this is precisely where you're losing marks. Maybe you are getting all the content right. Maybe you're ending up finding 10 out of 10 content points. Maybe you have 11 points. Maybe you have 12 points. But if you're writing them down wrong, then you will end up losing marks. What do I mean by formality? No abbreviations. Let's get that out of the way first. What do I mean by abbreviations? Some kids write down etc. Some kids write down I.E, to give alternatives or to give extra, which by the way are also not required. Examples are not required. So no abbreviations. Number 2, we are looking at no contractions. For those of you who don't know what contractions are, from physics, we have, I think, contract and relax or something of that sort. I don't know, I'm not a physics person. But contract actually means shortened versions of words, shortened versions. What do I mean by shortened versions? Didn't, couldn't, shouldn't, etc. So shoulda, coulda, woulda, as we say. You can't use that. You're supposed to write down did not, could not, would not, had not, and all of that. Third, just generally, by the way, this is not a part of formal language. So I'm going to draw a line here, but no personal pronouns. A lot of you aren't even aware of this, but using the pronouns I, me, or myself, placing yourself in the summary is also a very big problem. So if you are making yourself as part of a summary, then that is also a problem. Number four, again, these are things that you're not supposed to do to ensure that what you are writing is correct. Overuse of connectives. Overuse of connectives means, you know what connectives are? There are two kinds of connectives. One connectives are those really big, thick, heavy words like additionally and moreover and furthermore, etc. And then there's the other kind, which by the way, I personally prefer, which I think we also call coordinating conjunctions. But there's an acronym for it, fanboys. Just remember that. So for and not, but, or, yet, and so. So these are really nice connectors. And the reason is that they bring this natural fluency in your summary. What do I mean by overuse of connectives? Some kids are under the impression that there has to be a connective behind every single sentence that they write down. And that is not true. You don't have to do that. Connectives, as the word indicates itself, it's supposed to connect sentences. But if they are impeding sentences or they are, bringing space or distance between sentences, or if they are making every sentence look like an individual entity, then that's a problem. And that is exactly what's happening in most of your summaries. When you are using words like additionally and moreover, it looks like 5, 6, 7, 8 different sentences squeezed together in one text. There is no fluency in your summary. There's no coherence. In simple words, it looks like I've taken 6 different sentences and I've just written them together. It doesn't look like it's part of the same text. And that is because you are overusing connectives. And that is a very big problem. Can you end up writing only 2 connectives in a summary? Yes, that is absolutely true. Please don't be under the impression that you have to give 5, 6, 7 connectives to write down a good summary. It doesn't work like that. If it is required, you use it. If it's not required and your summary is going perfectly fine without them, do not write them down. It's not, how you say it, it's not a golden rule to add connectives every single time you use a summary. If they are required, you write them down. If you feel like you're doing perfectly fine without it, then you don't write them down. You don't absolutely have to write them down. Nobody has said it. So please keep these few things in mind regarding summary writing. Everything else is in the video that I've made, so you can take a look at that, and it takes care of everything else. All right, let's move forward to 2A. We still have about 30 minutes, so I feel like we can easily get done with question 2. Not the writer's craft, because like I said, that requires a lot of time on its own. But I will discuss the language questions. At least I will try to do as much as I can. So now it says text C. We're done with text A. We're done with text B for both IG and GC. We're now looking at text C. All right, it says identify a word or phrase from the text. Now, there are a couple of problems which I feel like getting out of the way first. Identify a word or phrase from the text, which means the answer has to be from the text. Now, there are some kids that when they take a look at this underlined phrase, they start writing this down in their own words. But can you take a look at the question for a bit for me? It says identify a word or phrase from the text which suggests the same idea as the words underlined. Nowhere are they saying that you have to use your own words. And what did I tell you in the very beginning of this class? That examiners are recommending, it's a very strong recommendation from the examiners themselves. How do I know this? It's in the examiner report. You can open that up and take a look at it yourself. Their recommendation is that unless the text specifies, unless the question specifies, you don't use your own words and you use the words of the text. But this question is quite literally making it clear to you. It's saying find it from the text. So no more writing the answer in your own words, at least for 2A. So 2A says, what are you going to do? This underlined part that we have, you have to find out its replacement from, sorry? Its replacement from the text. So please remember a few key techniques regarding this. Write only interested person watching. So it could be curious spectator gazing, for example. I'm just giving you a random idea. And curious takes care of the word interested, person takes care of the word spectator, and watching takes care of the word gazing. So don't write down anything else because what happens is that when you write more, your answer seems to be out of the bounds of the question, and that becomes a problem as well. So you have to stick to what the question asks you. Same for this, same for this, and same for this. Not going to be spending more time on this because, again, we have to ensure that we get done with everything. This one is really interesting. Using your own words. Sorry, I will have to. Please give me 1 minute. All right, guys. Using your own words, explain what the text means by each of the words underlined. All right, so for 2B, we are looking at context-based questions. Or in other words, contextual meanings. Now, I want you to understand something here. This was something that I discussed with my class as well when I was teaching them. The first word is envisage. It's difficult to envisage or envisage, whatever you want to call this. It's difficult to envisage how cut off from our previous lives we were back then. Some kids might be of the idea that envisage means think here. And maybe to some extent you might be right. But then again, the question is that you have to explain what the writer means by each of the words underlined in the text. So it's difficult to think how cut off from our previous lives we were back then. Quite literally doesn't make sense because the context is our previous lives and then back then. So you're going to look back. Now, whenever you look back, you don't just think, you imagine. So the actual meaning of the word envisage is going to be imagine, not think. Will I get a mark if I write down imagine and think here? I will not get a mark. Why? Because your answers are not supposed to be shopping lists for the examiners. If you are giving me 2, 3 words that as an examiner I'm supposed to choose an answer from, then that's a problem because this is not how it works. So try and give less answers, and again, of course, try to guess as much as you can because of course it all eventually comes down to your understanding. So, can I write down multiple answers? Nobody recommends it. I don't think there's any teacher who's going to recommend it. And examiners don't recommend this as well. They ask you to write down short answers, to the point answers, one answers, single word or phrasal answers, which, by the way, is also something that I will write down here. That if I can find a one word substitute or a one word answer, can I write that down? Absolutely yes. If I am finding out, or in my head, I have a phrasal alternative, can I write that down as well? Yes. So please remember that it's not that you have to write down only one word and you will get the mark. You have to explain the answer however that is. So if you can explain well in one word, we're okay with that. If you can explain well in a phrasal way, we can work with that as well. That works perfectly fine. Let's take a look at 2C. Should we take a look at 2C first, or should we go back to GCE first? Let's take a look at GCE for a bit, and then we can take a look at those questions. Now, question 2A for GCE is a very interesting question because it's what we call the use of language questions. For those of you preparing for GCE, time to pay close attention to these questions because all of these questions are implicit. Implicit is they are indirect, which means that if you are not a very good reader, then you might struggle. So time to really brush up those reading skills. Let's take a look. They reached the palace gate under the stern gaze of the guards, who showed no interest in elephants or boys who would become famous one day. What does the writer want to suggest to us about what happens to Jahan later in life? Later in life means in the future. Suggest, which means what they're actually asking you to do is to predict the future. Now, this prediction of the future, how do I know this? Because I've just tried to understand the wording of the question. Please remember that questions like these require a very, very thorough understanding. So not only are you supposed to read text A, but you are also supposed to really, really harness those reading skills and understand what the writer is trying to show you about the characters, even without saying it. And so you're going to write it down. Suggestions, predictions, all of these are indirect. So you will have to read the text and figure that out. Maybe I can make a video on this some other time as well, where I solve one question with you while keeping the text side by side so you can see how that's done. But for now, we'll have to make do with this. Explain why the writer uses the word mammoth rather than large in the phrase, a mammoth door with iron studs. So this is a question, again, a language question. It has to do with nuances. I would have asked you to raise your hands, those of you who don't know what nuances are. But by the way, those of you, because I can't do that in the class right now, I'm just going to have to make do with what I have. Nuances actually means shades of meaning, shades or intensity of meaning. See, the thing with English is that we are supposed to capture the exact reason why the writer may have said it. For example, I walk to the door and then I dash to the door has two different meanings. If you take a look at the word walk and the word dash, both of them suggest different meanings. Walk suggests neutrality. So there's some kind of neutral behavior. But dash suggests urgency. Do you see how just the changing of the verb, by the way, these are verbs here. So just a change of the verb has changed the entire reason why I'm moving towards the door. That is known as nuances. So your job is to figure out in English why a certain word has been used instead of the other word. By the way, even if you haven't taken a look at the text, the word mammoth, if I take a look at shades, by the way, if I say big, and then I say large, and then I say humongous, and then I say mammoth, all of you can notice a pattern here. The pattern is that the largeness of size is increasing as I go up, which means that if I am using the word large instead of the word big, it means I want to capture some largeness, more than just big. In the same manner, if I'm using the word mammoth instead of the word large, it means it's not just large, it's huge. And because I want to capture that hugeness or that humongous, part, the fact that it's really, really, really big, I'm going to use the word mammoth. So if they are saying a mammoth door, which is, by the way, an adjective here, Mammoth door means it was a giant, like a gigantic sort of a door. So this is what the examiner wants you to write down. So what are you going to write down in a question like that? Explain why the writer uses the word mammoth rather than large in the phrase a mammoth door with iron studs. Because the writer wanted to capture the gigantic size of the door, and you'll get the mark. So I hope you understand that what is going on here. We're trying to capture the largeness of it. And yes, these kind of questions pop up every now and then, and you are supposed to know what? Please remember nuances. Why is this word being used instead of that word? Someone saying to someone and someone barking to someone. So they, gave an order and then they barked an order carries different connotations. Saying is neutral. Barking is, it has that anger in it. So you figure that out and things become really easy. Let's take a look at the next question. Read this sentence from the text. They were taken to a barn with an earthen floor and lofty ceiling, which, by the way, is a very descriptive idea. Chota's new airy home. What effect does the writer suggest about the barn by using the phrase airy home? Now, this is again where things become really interesting. Everything about English is interesting, at least to me, because I'm an English teacher. I don't know how you guys treat English, but it's very interesting if you try and if you start trying to make sense out of it. Now, they're saying there's a barn. Barn has an earthen floor, right? So it's descriptive. A lofty ceiling, again, descriptive. Chota's new airy home. What does the word airy suggest here? And the question is, what effect? Please remember that the moment you have the word effect, it actually means on you. What do I mean by you? On the reader. What does it make me feel? All right. What does it make me feel? So when I take a look at this sentence or this phrase, Chota's new airy home, it means that because the word airy is right next to the word new, it means that previously he was in some other home or some other house or some other place. And the word home suggests belonging, which means that Chota is at ease here. And now you have the word airy. So if I put the word new, it means there's a new place. Airy, airy means spacious. And then I have the word home. Home connotes belonging. It's about connotations. So what do I end up with? That what does this suggest about the barn by using the phrase? It suggests that the barn was quite comfortable for Chota. Or that Chota felt at ease in the barn. But please remember that we have to make barn the, how do you say it, the epicenter of our answer, because the question says, what effect does the writer suggest about the barn? They're not saying what effect does the writer suggest about Chota's feelings. So we're going to say that the barn was quite comfortable, or the barn was very spacious, or the barn was very, how do you say it? The barn could easily house Chota, or the barn was a very easily, how do you say it, was a very nice place to stay in for Chota. So you have to discuss what the barn felt at that point, right? So please remember to not forget what the epicenter of the question is. Let's take a look at the last one. Read this sentence from the text. Inside was a sullen fellow of an age that was impossible to determine who glared at Jahan, clearly blaming him for the animal's condition. What two impressions of Taras does the writer want to convey to the reader in this sentence? Impressions. Do you know what impressions are, by the way? Impressions are, you know how, imagine meeting someone for the very first time and they're very kind to you and they smile with you and they're very gracious and they're very pleasant. You will say that they are very congenial. Congenial means pleasant. How do I know that? Because, well, they were smiling at me and they shook hands with me and they talked with me. So I can think that they are pleasant. So impressions are, by the way, implicit. So all of these questions are implicit, but impressions especially because you take a clue That's it's something that I've been saying for a while now. You take a clue and then you go ahead and then you deduce and make sense out of it. So, inside was a sullen fellow. Let's take a look. By the way, if I am trying to gain an impression of someone from some kind of a situation or a context, I'm going to be looking for adjectives because I need to know what words has the writer used to describe that person. So, what are a few words that we have in terms of description of the person? Sullen, an age that was impossible to determine. We have the word glared, and then we have this person was blaming him for the animal's condition. Now, guys, I want you to take a moment and just take a look at all of the words that I have here. I have the word sullen. Do you know what sullen means? Take a moment and think. Then I have the word glare. Then I have the word blame. What do all three words have in common? All three of these words have in common. All three of them are negative. All three of them have a negative connotation. Connotations are associations. All three of these words are negative. So, which means that what two impressions of Terrace did the writer wanted to convey to the reader? That Terrace wasn't a very pleasant fellow. That's one thing that we have, but we have to be more specific, of course. But just taking a look at these three words, I can tell that he was blaming him for the animal's condition, and he was slightly sullen, and he was glaring. Um, it just goes on to show that he wasn't very pleasant. And then you, of course, use adjectives to write the answer down. So take a look at the words that we have in the question and then try to get at the answer. And eventually you'll get the hang of it. Because we are short on time, I'm going to go back to IG paper and just do 2C and we will stop here because 2D is something that I will have to spend some more time in. Use one example from the text below to explain how the writer suggests the attitude of the owner of the orange juice. By the way, I believe we have a question like that in GCE as well, here, which is this one. Identify one example from the text below of how the writer uses language effectively to convey how the elephant is healed by Terrace. Let's take a look here. Same question, different wording. I just tell you how the question is supposed to be solved. Use one example from the text below to explain how the writer suggests the attitude of the owner. So, attitude is how is the person behaving? So, behavior. We can pick out any one example from this entire paragraph because we're supposed to pick out any one example. And then we are supposed to figure out what that one example suggests about the owner's behavior. Let's take a look at the paragraph. This is the story of that big red devil dug our best. This isn't a children's story. If you tried reading it to other children, they'll still lose interest and the petty details of our daily life. In one early letter to my parents, I wrote, "We had yet another meeting yesterday to sort out grievances. This latest inquest had been into who drunk someone's orange juice from the fridge. The devastated owner knew some had been stolen because he'd marked the level of liquid in the bottle." Now, there's a specific person who is being talked about in this paragraph who was the owner of the orange juice, the juice box, by the way. And let's take a look. A few examples that we can talk about here is devastated owner. That can be one example. Some had been stolen. That can be one example. He'd marked the level of liquid in the bottle. It can be another example. Why are these examples? Because all three of these examples are telling me about the attitude. Devastated owner, the adjective devastated tells me, by the way, which is an emotive term, it tells me that the owner was, how do you say it? They were, very, very sad and they were, in a way, broken down, absolutely broken down about it. Some had been stolen. The use of the word stolen for juice, juice is something that's very, how do you say it? Not that important. And so the word stolen suggests that it was a very, very big, in a way, it was their, how do you say it? It was their thing, their ownership, and then it was stolen. So they were very careful of it as well, and that he'd mark the level of the liquid in the bottle. Who marks a juice level? And that's very petty. So this shows me multiple attitudes. So what am I looking at? The first thing that I do in a question like this is that I identify a short example. So I'm going to identify a very short example, of course, relevant to the keyword in the question. Number two, I'm going to try and identify for a moment the metaphorical, the meaning of the example. So metaphorically, what is being suggested? Number three, if I can, I'm going to see if there's any adjective, adverb, part of speech basically, or if there's a literary device, or if there's any connotation of something, etc. So I'm going to identify something which is going to solidify my answer. And then lastly, I'm going to link everything back to the question, or as we call it, the tracker in the question. What is the tracker in the question here? The word attitude. So in this case, I'm going to link it back to the attitude. Let me write down a quick answer for you guys right now so you can take a look at how we can write it down. All right. So by using the adjectival phrase devastated owner, the writer has tried to highlight the misery of the person as to the extent of their brokenheartedness over the loss of their juice. The word devastated has connotations of loss and thus signifies that the owner of the orange juice seemed to have lost something precious. And this will get me a 3 out of 3. Why? Because I can identify. I have first identified a short example, which is the devastated owner. Then try and identify the metaphorical meaning. The metaphorical meaning is, as there was a word here, the extent of their brokenheartedness. So this was the metaphorical meaning. Then adjective adverb, I said that it's an adjectival phrase. So I said that here. And then I linked everything back to the attitude. The attitude was that the owner seemed to have lost something precious. So this is essentially how we're doing it. We're trying to ensure that we write down an answer in such a way that everything is captured. Somebody messaged me before the class if they are supposed to follow this specific PEEL format. By the way, those of you who don't know, PEEL stands for a point, evidence, explanation, and link. So I wouldn't say that it's a 100% peel format, but more or less it is it. You're figuring out a point, you are giving, an evidence of it, you are trying to explain it using this, and then you're linking everything back. So is this a peel example? Sure, if that's something that helps you remember how to solve the question, then that is also fine. All right, guys, we're going to stop here. Everything else we're going to do, I'm going to be making tiny videos on these things every other day. Hopefully, all of them are done before the paper. And that's about it. If there's any question that you have, please message me on Instagram and I will, inshallah, answer everything. I will also be uploading this video on YouTube. So if there's any question that you may have, you can comment down below on there as well. And we'll take care of that. Thank you so much for taking out the time to join in. And I'll keep on seeing you guys. Allah Hafiz.